call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, December 1, 2022. All managers are present but for managers Loftus and Olson. I don't believe we have members of the public here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Miller?
Second. Oh, Steve.
Manager Sando, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? On the consent agenda this evening, we have approval of November 17 board meeting minutes and two resolutions, 22072, which is recognition of the Citizens Advisory Council member Bill Bushnell, and 22073, which is approval of the 2023 board meeting calendar, and we've been kindly given printouts. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Maxwell, second. Sando. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? For my report, I'll say that the county commissioner meetings that James and I are happy to have begun. We met with Commissioner Latondras yesterday and have, I think, 4 scheduled next week, so we'll keep that rolling. Very positive. He was very interested in our projects, but also the appointments process, and we were able to talk about that. We'll move now to item 11.1, resolution 22073.
All right. Good evening, managers. Tonight I am before you to recommend the appointment of the 2023 Citizens Advisory Committee. Statute 103.331 requires the annual appointment of the seat from the office. So I'll just provide some quick background to reorient us to the realignment that took place in 2021. The purpose of the CAC has consistently evolved to reflect the focus of the district. As the district changed its focus to high-impact projects and policy changes, the committee's role also changed to provide strategic advice on the district's major initiatives. Resolution 21-042 adopted the CAC operational recommendations for realignment in June of 2021. The initiatives. Realignment included changes to recruitment to support an effective membership for engaging with MCWD's work. Realignment established and instituted 2-year staggered terms. Diversity is an essential part of the function of the CAC because it facilitates transparent, idea meritocratic culture that really strengthens the degree of continuity and institutional knowledge in our CAC year over year, while also balancing a flow of fresh and diverse perspectives to advise the district's work. So the CAC recruitment and appointment process unfolded this past fall. In August, a new online application form was created to optimize the candidate submissions and the analysis of all the applications received. Staff asked applicants to share the reasons for applying, their professional and community participation experience, how they conceptualize water management at a regional level, and some new members were then recruited through a multi-channel process first. The application was posted to our website and LinkedIn, and we engaged with staff, CAC members, and partners at other agencies and nonprofit organizations to encourage the distribution of our application. A position description was also distributed with the application to explain the duties and expectations of CAC members. Compiled the applications for CAC recruitment and developed recommendations that were presented for the Operations and Programs Committee on November 3rd. Today, we are here to make the final appointments for the CAC, which are informed from the committee discussion back in November. To develop our recommendations for appointment, staff considered 3 main elements while reviewing applications. The background of our candidates helps us determine whether they will add value of our constituency. We also consider whether the applicant can demonstrate the ability to think at a systems or regional scale, so we can avoid special interests or localized issues and focus on the strategic priorities for the entire watershed. Staff also considers past community participation to determine whether the candidate has experience working with others in similar settings. This experience may support their ability to foster a supportive group culture or provide leadership to other CAC members. The table here is provided to remind you of the recommendations that were presented at the November 3rd OPC committee meeting. Staff recommend the reappointment of their term, and they're grouped here in the top section in yellow. These members did not go through a competitive application process, and applications for the remaining 8 positions on the committee for 2023. Staff, which excludes Bill Bushnell, who indicated that if the applicant pool was strong enough, he would be interested in stepping down to focus on other activities. New applicants from around the watershed, which are here in green. Those include Marcy Bean, Robert Gliski, Suzanne Giovanni, and Denise Tenen. All 4 completed strong applications that met our criteria. Marcy, a resident of Excelsior, previously worked for the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization and now works with Bar Engineering as a landscape architect. Robert Gliski is an active community participant and works for the engineering firm WSB, which also works with many of our communities here in the water. Years of experience working with the DNR, and her valuable water resource and floodplain management experience would be an asset as we advance strategic initiatives and projects, especially in the face of climate change. And finally, Denise Tenen would be a great candidate with an interesting lens to our work as an artist and educator who has worked specifically with underserved communities. Her perspective may provide great fodder for ongoing conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion here at MCWD. Although they completed satisfactory applications, staff are not currently recommending the appointment of new applicants Barbara Nash or Jan Zabel for 2023 CAC. We will stay in contact with them and encourage them to stay engaged with our district and apply again next year. And now here is the geographic distribution of the 2023 applicant pool. You'll notice we do have considerably more representation in the eastern part of the watershed, which also tracks the population density of the district. We will continue to work towards our goals of geographic diversity and recruit in the watershed. Orange are members who are just completing the second year of their term in 2023. Those in blue are incumbent applicants for our new applicants from around the watershed. So, if you remove the members that are not recommended for appointment, this is what the 2023 CAC geographic distribution would look like. Unless there are remaining questions, staff requests that you take action to appoint these applicants to the 2023 CAC with Resolution 22-074.
Thank you, Ms. Mull. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
I'll take the motion from Manager Maxwell, a second from Manager Kitchmati. Are there any questions?
Maybe just one question. Were all these the original ones? We didn't have to go with the alternates?
Correct, yes.
Okay,
They were all
I
interested.
thought that was right.
Do you know where each person heard about the openings?
We did collect that data, yes, from the new applicants. The website was a primary channel for hearing about it. There was others that had engagement through other staff members at the organization that they work for, such as Suzanne Giovanni has worked with us before, and then Robert Gliski, the organization he works for, WSB, is an engineering firm that partners with many of our cities, so he heard about that through the professional channel.
Okay. You mentioned LinkedIn, I think, I heard you say.
Yes, we did use that, but
Nobody came through that route.
no,
Okay.
not that they indicated at least.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Is it appropriate then to send the other two that were the alternates maybe, like agendas, where they stay informed of what's happening, like somebody else would, maybe it's the city attorneys or the attorneys? Can you just send
Well,
an
the
agenda to
agendas are
everybody?
posted on our website.
Well, that's true,
Yes,
it's posted, yeah.
Yeah,
that's true,
it's
too.
a public
Yeah.
meeting and they're posted, the
Yeah.
meetings and the agendas.
Anyway, I'd like you to do that.
Definitely. I'll stay in touch with
I'll
them.
make that a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I still have, is that a motion to amend? Let's make it a separate motion. Let's just
Separate motion.
Yeah, let's just continue with the motion to adopt the resolution and then come back to
Okay.
that. Any further discussion on the resolution? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Now your motion, Manager Miller?
That the two, is it alternates you called them?
Yes.
Receive the documents from each meeting so that they can stay informed and interested.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Manager Sando seconds. Any questions or discussion there? Those in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Mall.
Thank you.
Going now to 11.2, Ms. Westerland has Resolution 22-075.
Good evening, President White and Board of Managers. This evening, I'm recommending that the board approve Resolution 22075 and order the Lamplighter Pond Water Quality Project. On the agenda is first a statement of the purpose of this meeting, then a refresher on the background and scope of the project. Then I will move into a discussion of the St. Louis, and then finally move on to recommending project ordering. The purpose of this meeting is for the board to order the Lamplighter Pond Water Quality Project. I know I've shown you this a couple times recently, but here's an overview map of the relevant locations. The location of Lifetime is shown in relation to Lamplighter Pond and Northside Park.
Can you have a Kleenex?
As a refresher, in August of 2018, the board approved a variance request for Lifetime to the district stormwater management rule for permit 18153. The variance was approved because Lifetime couldn't meet stormwater requirements on site. As a condition of the variance, a cooperative agreement between the district and Lifetime agreed that Lifetime would provide $490,000 funds to build a stormwater treatment project that would meet the goal of 7.2 pounds per year phosphorus reduction. A condition of the agreement is that the district must take formal action 23. The proposed project is a manufactured treatment via gravity downstream to Lamplighter Pond. The project will remove 7.2 pounds per year of total phosphorus, meeting the terms of the Lifetime District Agreement. The project is estimated to cost $289,000. This map shows the northwest corner of Northside Park. The red rectangle symbolizes the proposed manufactured treatment device on Nevada Avenue. As you can see, it nestles into that existing parking median, so it's not going to disrupt any of the parking or the play facility or the baseball fields. So the last time I was before the board for the public hearing for this project on October 20th, I outlined the district city agreement and forecasted that it would go to the St. Louis Park Council on Monday, October 24th. I was really excited for that to happen and to get back to you. However, the city was not able to review the agreement on that council meeting date, so it was bumped to November 21st, where it was unanimously approved by the council, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The agreement outlines the city leading design and construction, and the city taking on operation and maintenance. Also included in the agreement are terms that the district will be consulted on engineer firm selection, and that the district is to approve final design and observe construction. So with St. Louis Park, I've also discussed having a kickoff meeting for the project in January with Todd Shoemaker, the engineer at Stantec who completed the feasibility study. So I'm excited to meet up with them in January. I just wanted to conclude with a picture from Northside Park where this project will be constructed, and these same baseball fields are next to the parking lot where the treatment project will be located. So I thought that as we look back on the journey that we've had bringing this project, envision the treatment facility right next to where these families are going to be parking on their way to their baseball game.
Those kids are in junior high by now. From when we
I
started.
did find this like on the website. I'm like, the kids' faces aren't visible. I'll just like steal it for this. Also, I'm not a sports person, but I was trying to find like a cool baseball metaphor for this project. I just kind of someone for the picture.
You hit it out of the park.
Oh, that's what I was hoping someone would say, so thank you.
She handed me that one.
Oh, man. Oh, thank you, thank you. I didn't expect anyone to say that. Without further 22-075, and order the Lamplighter Pond Water Quality Project, and I'm open to any questions that you have.
Well, what's the estimate of the annual cost of maintenance?
The annual cost, I had all these figures for the last slideshow. If I can't find those quickly, I can send those to you. But the remaining escrow will be used to fund several years of maintenance for the project.
Several years?
Yep.
15 grand a year, approximately.
There might be more questions. May I get a motion first to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell seconds. Any other questions for Ms. Westwood?
What was the St. Louis City of St. Louis Park's response to, were you talking about our engineer? Was they receptive to that, or they just say?
Very receptive, yeah. I haven't gotten the formal, I mean, there's going to be a formal process with St.
Yeah.
Louis Park, but Jer wants to have a kickoff meeting with Todd Shoemaker is the Stantec engineer, and myself, so there's definitely the.
Thank you.
Did I hear you say that St. Louis Park was going to take the responsibility for the maintenance?
Yes.
Okay. So then is that
Well, we're gonna pay them
Yeah,
out of this.
They'll
escrow.
use the escrow money,
Yeah.
the escrow funds.
That, Lifetime put up as a bond, so to speak, in place of being able to treat the water on their own site.
yes.
And it's anticipated 20-year life, if I recall from the report. Then St. Louis Park fills the gap.
Correct.
Yeah. Anything else for Ms. Westler? Then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11.3 is a resolution 22076. Ms. Cermak.
All right. Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. I'm here tonight seeking action to award the contract for our stormwater infrastructure data standardization project. I'm going to start off by just positioning where this specific project fits within our broader modeling and climate effort work. I'll walk through kind of what this scope of work is designed to accomplish, the RFP process we ran and how we've evaluated the proposals, and wrap up with staff's recommendation. So Pillar 1 of the Climate Action Framework is centered around developing a deeper understanding of how climate change is impacting both our natural and our built systems today, and allowing us to predict how those impacts will continue to change in the future. And a key part of that is making sure that we have the proper tools in place to give us that understanding. And one of the tools we identified needing is to develop a watershed-wide 2D model. So to drive this work forward and fund the watershed-wide model build, we have submitted a proposal to LCCMR. This timeline here shows kind of how the work would shake out if we would have received funding through the 2021 submittal period. And you can see the work really builds off sequentially leading up to the 2027 comp plan, which we've said will be focused around climate change and volume management. However, I believe we're all tracking that due to a clerical error by LCCMR, we did not receive funding through the 2021 cycle. So we had to pivot and think how the new application would kind of impact our timelines. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury to kind of fully shift all of this work by a year since the comp plan is a fixed date. So really what ends up happening is we're narrowing the window that we have to build out the watershed-wide modeling tool. And so as we were retooling the application for 2022, we took a look at, is there some work that we can chunk out of that proposal and drive forward ahead of LCCMR funding to ensure that we can kind of hit some of these long-range targets. So we turned to kind of our pilot model and the learnings that were coming out of that. Going into the pilot model, we had a really clear idea of what the modeling 2D model would require as far as data sets going in, but we didn't know what that process to get them into the model would exactly look like. And that was a key objective of the pilot model, was to develop those automated processes that work to assimilate all these data sets into a model-ready format. One particular challenge we had identified is how we were going to address storm sewer data sets, particularly because each city maintains their own database, and with that comes a unique structure and their own naming conventions for all of the data within it.
Before you jump out of that,
Yeah.
what, if any, are we gonna do on the groundwater?
Um, Yeah, great question. So for the groundwater data, it will be a little bit dependent on which modeling platform we pick on exactly what that data set looks like. A lot of the models pull from soil information, the depth to bedrock that we have to kind of understand that underlying kind of setup of that portion of the model. And then we can draw from groundwater wells to kind of calibrate that portion.
Can I ask a really ignorant question? What's the difference between the groundwater and the aquifer in terms of depth?
Manager Miller, so my understanding, and please everyone chime in if I'm interpreting your question wrong. So with the groundwater within the model, we're really focusing on shallow water table kind of levels and how that exchange is happening with our surface water. And a lot of times, kind of the DNR deep aquifer wells are looking at, much below that when we're not seeing that interaction with our streams and lakes as fast.
Can I continue just for a second? Because I know nothing about it, so I guess announce that and then you'll know when I ask the question. The aquifer, several years ago, they were talking about how fast it was getting drained. And I don't know which one it was, whether, but is that still a big concern?
President White, Manager Milliger, I can't totally speak to that question. What I can try to answer from kind of the last one is what this model won't be doing is kind of tracking how recharge rates are contributing to the deep aquifer level. I think that's where we would rely on more of a regional groundwater specific model, but yeah.
Thank you.
I think most of the regional aquifer around this area is Prairie du Chien aquifilter, I think it is. Yeah. Most, just about all around this way is Prairie du Chien, I think.
Does that still have there was a warning, if not a problem, I don't know.
Mr.
A
Beck.
few years back.
Yeah, President White, Manager Miller. I think an easy way to think about it is there's typically a water table aquifer, which interacts directly with surface water features.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the confined aquifer, which is usually used for drinking water, which is usually depleted. And you can't add back to that. So we're looking specifically at the, something's becoming depleted stable, if that's clear. I don't know.
Thank you.
And that's beyond our jurisdiction. Okay. It's not,
It's not beyond our jurisdiction, but it's beyond what their work scope
They're
is.
gonna work on.
okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right, so lucky for us, during the time period that we were reworking the LCCMR application, we had made a lot of headway within the pilot model. And we had, largely figured out what these automated processes were going to look like. Relating to stormwater, we had learned that in order to get kind of our pilot test geography of Edina, to get their data set into coordinate and have back and forth communication with the city of Edina to better understand their data structure. And then we were able to take that understanding and put it into a mapping table that kind of helped us link the original data set to the new standard. This data mapping portion, discrete bucket of work that we thought would benefit. And we knew this would be time-consuming work because we do have to do this city to city. And secondly, this work is fully independent of which modeling platform we pick. So we're able to kind of drive this work in parallel to the pilot model closing out. So we did move forward and pull out that portion of work from the LCCMR.
Can you back up?
Yeah.
Where are we getting this information?
So through the pilot model, when we worked with Edina, we dove into their data, and then we had to coordinate with them on what certain fields and kind of elements of their data meant. And then we kind of turned to making these data tables that help us link how their current structure links to the structure we're trying to get to. So it's something that we made through the pilot model,
Okay,
these tables.
thank you.
So we pulled that out of the proposal, and that chunk of work is what's in front of you tonight for contract award. So the scope was designed to kind of accomplish those two things that we learned we needed through the pilot. First is we're asking the consultant to coordinate with each city to characterize each of the data set structure. And then we're asking them to develop those mapping tables so that we are set up come July with LCCMR to kind of fully automate this process. Board authorized approval of the RFP release at the October 20th meeting. We posted it on the website and did directly email it to 6 firms that we felt like would be interested in this work. In total, we received 5 proposals from Bolton and Mink, Geosyntec, Kimley Horn, Stantec, and WSB. And the proposals were reviewed by 3 district staff. We did take advantage of submitting some follow-up questions to obtain kind of additional clarity as needed. We called references, and we did provide our board liaisons, Manager Hejmati and Manager Miller, with the proposals and a summary of staff's evaluation. As we evaluated the proposals, we really looked at, did the proposal have a strong understanding, a clear approach, what skill sets and experience were they bringing to the table? Do they have any existing kind of relationships and connections at any of the cities for the project? And was the cost and hour allocation across tasks supportive of the approach they laid out? So after staff's evaluation, we are here tonight recommending the contract award go to Bolton and Mink. Their proposal was well within our project budget. They really showed a clear project understanding and approach. They demonstrated that they not only understand specifics, and something that really stands out that I think positions Bolton and Mink to tackle this work effectively is that they actually oversee and manage the databases for 11 of the cities within the district already. So they're coming in kind of already with a deep understanding of 11 of the data sets, and we think that's going to benefit the project. So with that, I am recommending Resolution 22076 to award the contract to Bolton and Mink for our stormwater data standardization project.
Thank you, Ms. Cermak, and thanks to our liaisons, to Managers Miller and Hejmati. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell. Any further questions for Ms. Cermak?
What kind of reception we get from the cities? Positive?
Yeah, great question, Manager Maxwell. In anticipation of this work, we've already reached out to request a data set, close to all of them. So that's a great sign of kind of willing to work with us and get this data organized.
Is Bolton and Mink going to do most of the work then, or is it with our staff? Or is it
Yeah, so task 1 within our scope is really clarifying what that coordination approach is going to look like, kind of who serves what role, and making sure they really understand the city and who to be working with. On a technical level, we see
Bolton Mink, I mean, Santex is really good too, but Bolton Mink is really a good company too. I worked with them a lot in the city. So they are good. They know what they're doing.
Anything else from Ms. Cermak? Manager Hejmati?
My question is about the next steps, and maybe James or Vicky can jump in and answer on this one, which is, forward is the relationships with these folks that's going to allow us to develop projects. And this work is going to be integrated into the stuff that the land water partnership connections and so on. So help me please understand how this is going to integrate so that we can get those people on board and get going.
Sure thing. Good question, Manager Hejmati and Board of Managers. I think that's a question that we appreciate the consistency because you've asked before at the board setting, but also asked as a liaison to this important work. And I think working with you and Manager Miller, you've made it clear that you're deepening the technical veracity and the quality of staff's work as we move through pilot and into full model build. But that ultimately, we're really interested in building the relationship infrastructure that's needed to bridge the technical work into policy setting and strategic direction setting for the 2027 plan. So we don't have a concrete work plan for it, but I'll reflect, what we've discussed in the past that's starting to come into clear focus for the different staff teams. And that's that as we connect with municipal leadership at a council level or city manager level or climate level within communities, just as a routine course of doing business, we're making sure they understand where we're tracking with our 2027 plan, the role that we're carving out in climate, and how that's a role of service to communities with this motto build coming first. And you'll recall that as we pursued LCCMR funding now 2-3 times in a row, we have broad support in Resolution community, the Park Board, Hennepin County, and many upper watershed communities. Speaking of the county, as we've made the annual rounds, President White and I, for the last 2.5 years now, as we've been discussing climate action planning with the Citizens Advisory Committee and Board. It's a concrete part of our agenda. We're really focused on building county commissioners' understanding of what we see coming, what the emerging pressures will be within the watershed related to changing precipitation patterns, and that this is our premier work, building out this model to analyze the vulnerabilities across the watershed and then develop cohesive policy and project management strategies to balance water from the upper to lower watershed, with the dam being in the middle. Those are messages that we've delivered consistently and I believe are well understood by the county commissioners. And that works at the Pollution Control Agency. We've had a number of conversations with the PCA commissioner, Katrina Kessler, who knows us well from her former role as Surface Water and Sewer Director at the City of Minneapolis. And we have now frequent connections and are establishing a quarterly rhythm with water resource leadership at the Metropolitan Council, which is trying to do this work one scale above us. So as we do pilot work at a city scale with Edina and Victoria, we're scaling to a watershed scale. The Met Council is thinking about how they're using our watershed scale as a pilot for the region. So I feel like at a county, state, regional scale, and municipal scale, people really understand the direction that we're tracking. That's the first step, is awareness of the project, its purpose, and how we'll need to draw on their data sets, and ultimately that the model will call some significant policy questions that we'll need to wrestle with as a group. So then that gets us to, well, what's the process? And we don't have the process detailed out, but through the Technical Advisory Committee meetings that are held in this room now once a month for the Land and Water Partnership, and the rule revisions, which are expected to go through Q3 of 2023, we've explicitly discussed with that group and members of the advisory committee that after we get through the important work of Land and Water Partnership and rule revisions, we want to start dialoguing on climate conversations. And I think it's that process, most concretely, wrapped with that broad situational awareness at the county, state, regional, elected leadership level with cities, is where we're going to do the work. And I would envision that end of 23 to 25, we're having open climate conversations. See as the pressures, what are their priorities, what are their plans, and what are their priorities, what are their needs, and doing a lot of grounding work. And that will set the stage for in 2025 to 2027 when Kaylee and Brian deftly deliver the funds. We're going to have the scenario analyses and vulnerability maps to then spend 2 years really discussing. It's a long-winded answer, but we spent a lot of time, because we spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. It's not all mapped out on paper, but we've taken a two-pronged approach. One is build awareness, prime the pump relationally as we're making the runs and then thinking about and into climate conversations, 18 months of those before we actually get the model results and start wrestling with what it's telling us about the potential future.
Sounds great.
It's going to be wonderful.
Very exciting. I'm sorry.
It'll go perfect.
Yeah. It is excellent, yeah. Very well thought through and very well planned. And the fact that you're going to all levels and you're letting them know ahead of time is going to be really important, because that will prime them. My only concern would be the elected officials, on policy, when they change who they are and how to prime them so that.
Yeah.
That would be my only concern on this.
Yeah, I think we're tracking that concern, and it's actually part of my, we'll be giving an post-election snapshot that Samantha is tag teaming with Jill Carlson, our government relations consultant, both at that legislative and then municipal level. And that's something that we're keeping tabs on. And I think even through the application process for incumbent board members seeking reappointment from the county board, I'd heard back from Manager Loftus as she approached Deep Haven City Council. They'd love to hear from us, once a year. So I think as we continue to build out staff capacity, there's a potential over the next 3 or 4 years to ramp up the formality with which we're doing the relationship management, whereas it's been more organic touch points, but that we have a really clear read and a level set over all the communities, that in the next several years, we might develop something like that, of a program of rounds on an annual basis, to make sure we have touch points with communities and really understand where we're tracking with the 2027 plan, so there aren't surprises. And undoubtedly, as we ramp up into the 2027 plan, what we did last time is to complement our technical committee. We had a policy advisory committee that was sort of steering and setting strategic direction and getting technical reports back from the staff work group. So as we get closer to kicking off officially our comp plan process, we'd have probably a formal kickoff. We're in that building, informing, more organic, pre-official comp plan stage, waiting for before we work with our policy planning team and in 2027 with a comp plan that is focused on volume. And we talked about that in our committee meeting, being the subject of the board's retreat, is like, what's the next 5 years going to look like? What's the board's concerns? What are your ambitions? And how are we going to make sure we deliver? So I think we'll be okay with the policymakers as well. And we're tracking how the comings and goings through the different election cycles, and we'll just continue doing that up until
Okay.
the
Right,
plans.
until the 2027 plan, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think the policy advisory committee is going to include policy level people from many of these cities, you think?
Great question. I mean, these are all sort of down the road, but like, since we're on topic, our last frame of reference is, and the way that we've approached this is an opt-in process. So we're doing open telegraph to everybody. We're letting people know what we think our charge is, that we're open for partnership and collaboration. And then based on individual community needs, they're deciding, are we assigning somebody to sit on the policy advisory committee? Would we prefer periodic points of engagement where you're reporting back to our full council? Are we content with staff participation at the technical level? Are we content tracking through, your newsletters?
So let them decide how they want to engage.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then
got it.
after we have that opt-in process, is usually mirroring that back out to people to confirm, sweeping up stragglers, and then knowing that if people are opting out because they're busy, that we need to proactively think about what touch points we have with people that aren't going to be sitting on a steering committee.
Excellent, sounds great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else before we vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you.
Great work.
Yes. We'll move to item 11.4, and it's Christopher presenting Resolution 22077.
All right, thank you, President White, managers. Tonight, staff is requesting conditional approval of the Edina's amendment to their local water management plan. As you may recall, this was discussed with the Policy and Planning Committee in October. And just as a brief refresher, the city has amended their local water plan to incorporate their flood risk reduction strategy, which includes changes to policies, implementation program, and also incorporates additional detail on priority projects aimed at reducing flooding within the city. And their primary goal really is focused on public safety and reducing exposure of private principal structures to flooding. And since this is considered a major amendment, it requires MCWD approval to ensure that it meets the requirements of statute and rule, as well as consistency with the district's plan. So as I mentioned, this was discussed in committee in October, and we reviewed, kind of the content of the amendment, as well as our review findings. And so staff and the district engineer reviewed the amendment in detail and really focused in on trying to understand what the potential is for downstream impacts that may result from the changes proposed in the plan as the city works to reduce flooding within their boundaries. And based on our review, we identified two main areas of concern for potential downstream impact. One is with the proposed capital improvements to reduce local flood risk, some of which include infrastructure changes that would increase downstream conveyance. So
For each of them, they look at, kind of a combination of what happens if we increase conveyance, what happens if we increase storage, what happen, other changes kind of to the system and kind of different combinations thereof. And so there's no one recommended path at this stage. It just sort of is a range of options. And then the other area of concern is just with their policies that allow for property owners to fill elevation standards. They do not require compensatory storage. Rather, they model to ensure that there will not be an increase in the 100-year flood elevation. And so really our concern across both of these areas is that, while you may be able to demonstrate, no increase in flood stage on an individual project basis, there's not a good understanding of the cumulative effect across multiple projects, across multiple cities, with those kinds of changes being made, especially as those increase with climate change. And so following discussion with the PPC, with the city staff, requesting clarification and better understanding around these areas of concern, and then also ultimately requesting revisions to the plan that would acknowledge the potential for cumulative downstream impact and also speak to how the district or how the city will work with the district to evaluate and get a better understanding of the potential impacts and then work together to prevent or minimize any impacts, including, look at how we're going to work together on a project-specific basis, as we did with the Morningside project, and then also looking more at a system-wide scale as we look to advance our partnership with the pilot model into the full model build, looking to them as an advisor on that work. And then we also discussed it, and they were open to working with us to explore opportunities for regional flood storage projects, and they identified a few specific locations that will be noted in the plan where we might be able to explore that together. And then finally, we talked about updating our existing MOU with the city, which currently is focused on water quality improvements to reflect kind of these shared goals and priorities related to flood risk reduction. So based on the discussions with city staff, the city has agreed to make the requested revisions to the plan and ask that we provide draft language and bring it forward for conditional approval while that's being finalized and incorporated to keep their process moving forward. And so earlier this week, staff provided language. They've already responded and said that they're comfortable with that. And so we're just waiting up that final submittal, which we're anticipating soon. So with that, staff is requesting board approval of Edina's local water management plan as amended, condition on submittal of the final amended plan that incorporates our requested changes. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Christopher. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second? Manager Hejmati. Questions for Ms. Christopher?
I live in Edina, and it's a well-run city. I have no problem with it, but I got some recalls, especially the 87 flood, in which the sanitary and storm sewers were overwhelmed, and they pumped out the sanitary sewers into the creek. And I observed it myself because there was a whole series of storm or sanitary sewer lifts that failed because they were overwhelmed. I don't blame them for keeping the sewage out of people's basements. Does the plan recognize the failures in the past and how to accommodate them, in the future? Or do they just talk on public works, kind of move on with accommodating the additional density? Density is there's probably 3,000 or 4,000 more units of apartment than there was in '87, maybe more with high rises and everything. One is or are they just solving today's problems?
Yeah, Manager Miller, I can try to answer that and see if others have thoughts. I think the focus, at least with the capital improvements, is mainly on addressing undersized infrastructure that was put in, decades ago when we obviously didn't have the same precipitation patterns that we have now. We don't have the same level of development and have the same regulatory standards. And so I think it's mainly focused on kind of addressing some of that sort of legacy infrastructure. And I think the policies that they have in place further problems in terms of, some of the no adverse principles. I think that, the goal is to keep.
The focus would be on flooding from the creeks, but, on the west side, on the west side of Highway 100, the ponds and wetlands backed up into the houses causes sanitary sewers to be overwhelmed. But I would think that most of the people from 87 don't remember that, or there's new owners. So they're probably paying more attention to the creek side issues than infrastructure in the other areas where it was an anomaly, but 13 inches of rain in 24 hours is what they experienced in 87. We didn't even know about global warming, climate change.
City of Edina is also done this, is they are charged by the Met Council for inflow associated with those overflows. So they get taxed and additional capacity associated with it. So while it's not necessarily in this plan, they've been identifying it, they've been managing it through more of their sanitary management programs so that they limit the inflow that comes in associated. So they seal a lot of those manholes that are backed up into those wetlands to limit inflow into that because they get charged based on flow rates that come out of it. So while the plan doesn't necessarily get at that component, I believe since 87, they've addressed a significant amount of areas where they've had that inflow issue that comes along with that.
Okay. That doesn't count for the inflow from the flooded basements.
No, but it's kind of, they're assessing where their bigger problems are. And
Okay.
those manholes are absolutely their worst
Yeah.
problems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Ms. Christopher? This whole thing about water flowing downhill is going to keep going through, isn't it, as we go forward? All those in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Resolution is adopted. Item 13 on our agenda is to ask whether there are any inquiries, issues, or ideas managers wish to submit for consideration. No hands. Then we will go to an update on the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk reconstruction. Ms. Schaufler.
Good evening, Chair White, managers. Tonight I'm going to provide an update on the status of the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk reconstruction project. I was before you about a month ago, and the board approved awarding the contract for the project to JTS Construction. Over the last month, JTS has been working on trying to secure lumber, which has taken a bit more time due to broader industry issues that the board had kind of flagged at the time of approving the contract, which is leading to longer lead times on getting the material. However, we got good news today that the contractor notified us that they were able to verbally submit an order for all the material that's needed for the design, and are waiting to sign the contract, which they hope to do tomorrow. And then next week, they'll have a better sense on when the lumber will arrive on the site and when reconstruction can begin. Right now, they're anticipating that the lumber will take about 10 to 12 weeks, which will vary. So once the contractor has a better sense on the timing of the existing structure, and then reconstruct the project completed by March 31st. And if necessary, if we do need to amend or revise that completion date, we'll keep the board abreast on any adjustments needed along the way. And with that, I can take any questions.
Well, I'd move that we authorize the staff to extend the completion period if necessary.
I would not vote in favor of that because I think we should wait and see if we need to.
Because what?
We have lots of time to wait and see if we need to. March is a long way away, sort of a long way.
Well, okay.
Others may differ. Manager Hejmati.
Yeah. Apparently this is a La Nina year and we're going to have a lot of more precipitation and so on. Is that going to affect the schedule?
Manager Hashmati, managers, good question. That's something we're trying to think through. So obviously the March 31st date was there because of the seasonality, working in a wetland along the creek.
Right.
And then also there's some just regulations that start to come into play with fish spawning and stuff like that. So just trying to understand how to work around that and have contingency plans in place if we find ourselves there. Preliminary conversation with the contractor, they feel comfortable and seem, you know, as contractors do, though, tell you how they can get the work done despite if the site's flooding. But essentially, they just want to be able to get the foundation on there, and then said essentially they can just work from, you know, the air because you have a platform under you.
Okay.
I read on Nextdoor, which is the Edina website, that the boardwalk is open now to the public for walking on.
Manager Sando and managers, the boardwalk's been closed. On December 3rd, the board also authorized staff to officially close it for the winter just because of the liability and safety issues. So we've installed kind of a lumber and X's and top and bottom to prevent people from being able to access it.
And then somebody wrote on this Nextdoor that it was open and they were patching it as we went along, so that's not correct. It's not open.
No, correct, it's not open.
Was there a monetary fine if they weren't completed by March 31st, or was that, we don't do that?
Manager Maxwell, manager, there is, within our specifications, we have what we call liquidated damages. So if they are missing the deadline, it's a $100 thing that the district could charge. In this case, we're trying to just understand if, you know, if it was things out of their control or if it were things within their control, and are trying to just gather information we need to be able to make those decisions if we get to that point.
Was it $100 a day, or was it?
$100.
Yeah, so that might entice them a little bit to move a little quicker on it. But I agree, I don't think they're gonna finish by March 31st either. And they'll probably ask to come back and waive the $100 a day.
Yeah, and that's information we'll continue to gather just as we get more details on lumber delivery, anticipated how much time they need to actually reconstruct, and then having conversations with legal counsel and our SRF as the engineer on it as well.
Any other questions for Michelle? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I went out and walked before it got closed to make sure I saw one last time with boards. Administrator's report, Mr. Whisker.
Yes, thank you, President White, managers. Kick things off, picking up where we left off last time with a question from Manager Hejmati around the likelihood that we would be able to finish flying the LiDAR for the creek topo at the last meeting. And you'll probably remember that I think it was in late October 20th, that the board authorized us to contract with MnDOT to fly the LiDAR, is really to take advantage of the dry creek bed to get continuous light detection and topographic information about the entire creek channel. And the early November snow threatened to thwart that, and it hasn't gotten any better this week. So it looks like we're going to be reverting back to the original approach, which is captured in the proposal for funding with LCCMR, which is just very select transects up and down the creek. You just got a report today on, the timing of that work and when the funding will come through. We'll see where we're at with La Nina and spring and next year and how dry it is, and we do have the option to revisit that, but just in terms of this season, that's where we stand. MAUD is now, but it'll be tomorrow for me, and I think President White and Mike Heyman, and we'll be driving up there. Be interested to connect with all of our different partners. Mike, I think I mentioned last time, is presenting Arden Park. It sounds like our friends from the city of Edina have a presentation slated at MAUD this year. Interesting to check out and see what kind of reception that gets as a climate and resilience and risk transfer project by a city, and their engagement with the watershed on that. Make a quick note, I think we let our liaisons know that the Hennepin County Chloride Initiative is eligible and up for Program of the Year award and might be a front runner for the award. I think I'm allowed to say that. And so we're a part of that, and if that receives the award, we'll be obviously very excited. Last, I was really excited to be going to join Lewis at his law class and presenting down at the University of Minnesota. I just wanted to report back how fun it was. He's definitely doing a tremendous job, I would say, sharpening the next generation of bright legal minds on the significance of Minnesota watershed law, and it was really fun. And the students are incredibly smart and asked some really great, insightful questions about Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, things that they had heard on Nextdoor and social media about Grays Bay Dam, and why is that so controversial, and is everything I've heard really true about how you're operating the dam? So we spent some good time talking about dam management, our focal geography strategy, project funding, relationship. I connected with Lewis afterwards. In some ways, it just gave me tremendous hope about the future, because there's some really sharp pull that.
Maybe looking for our legal counsel work?
Yeah, well, I think that's what Lewis is doing. He's training them. He's got a strong succession plan. Speaking of, I guess, succession plans, I heard today from the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, and you'll remember we had LMCD board members at one of our recent meetings just introducing themselves, but their executive director has tendered their resignation effective January 30th. So as a partner around the lake community, you'll be interested to hear about their recruitment process and await news of the replacement for Vicki Schlenning, who's been their executive director now for a number of years. I mentioned earlier in response to your question, Manager Hedgemati, and I think President White touched on it as well with regards to the conversation that we had with Commissioner Latondras, just how we're trying to keep pulse on the changes post-election. And Commissioner Latondras gave us some good insight in his vision of how the local landscapes change. And I just mentioned Samantha Joel Carlson will be in front of committee on December 15th, giving our board a snapshot of what's happened down at the legislature and what change we've seen through the elections at our local community scale, where that overlaps with our project and policy interests, and how that might precipitate next steps of outreach, connection, new introductions, new relationship building. So look for that at our next meeting. I feel like I'm on the Manager Hedgemati show here, because you had also asked a question at the last meeting about the outreach transition and when we might be prepared to backfill for Helen as our now departed program manager. And I said I need to give that a little bit more thought, because the dust had barely settled, and we were also at a point where we're beginning to welcome Josh Wolf, who's the new project maintenance land manager, who's starting on December 19th. So I wanted to just give a quick report back. That is sort of my imminent focus with Tiffany on the personnel front, is welcoming Josh, who's coming in from Salt Lake. And there's going to be a 60 to 90 day, I would say, relatively intense onboarding for him to hit the ground and make sure he's welcome, gets his strategic orientation, and picks up on the good work where Tiffany's leading off, and make sure they hit the ground running as a solid team. I think next in queue in terms of priority is operations. I've been spending some time talking to Deb, but not taking much action because I've been busy, thinking about posting the operations manager position. So I think we are still in a position where we can post that job in December, be in a position to hire end of January, 60 days, 90 days to make sure people get plugged in and all the resources that they need to our mission, a position of having some comfort in that manager position in May. And just since we're talking about it in terms of the priorities for that position in 23, because it's be a big shift growing back out our operations program, I think that there's going to be some front-loading focus on human resources development, bringing our classification and compensation study forward in the first quarter, and having that inform the budget to benchmark where we're at against the marketplace on salary. The handbook is desperately stale at this point from 2014, and as we keep referring back to it, the world's changed a lot since then. And there's a lot of clarity that we can add for our new staff coming into the organization that needs to be in its handbook. And I think we have some policies that have trickled through piecemeal through the board previously. We have a few more that are going to come in December maybe. And then the third focus under HR is going to be professional development, really mapping out on a department by department basis what the growth plans are and what investment we need to make in our team, continuing this trajectory of people first, and then the results will follow that we talked about at last committee meeting. And that's something that we're talking about, making a theme for the broader team in our all hands meetings that we have once a month for 2023. So just making 23 really focused on learning, professional development, growth. Other things operations going to be focused on is picking up on the campus improvements and renegotiating, picking back up the negotiations with the neighbors and seeing where those are at, and if those are still stalled, coming back to the board with hopefully a final choice and decision on if we want to pick up that project and finish it. And then I think their third, the budgets, that position in context of when hiring and onboarding fits with those other priorities, but also obviously the needs of Samantha and Stacy. And so we've been having a lot of meetings, spending a lot of time in our weekly huddles, our one-on-one, I think building context and just making sure tactical priorities like the Citizens Advisory Committee appointments, the website, those sorts of things get the attention that they need, and that Samantha and Stacy feel supported. They've got the clarity and can drive forward and execute. And that's complemented, I think, again, as we've been having quite a lot of directional strategic conversations. I keep warning them, if everybody knows this, if you're nickel in me, I lively meetings where I'm trying to create some context and direction for them, and then really focusing, I think, over the next couple months, the big ticket is going to be delivering the website, which has struggled and is behind schedule and is definitely in the center crosshairs for both Samantha, Stacy, myself, Brian, and Alex. So that's to say, I think we're in a mode where what I've heard from them is they feel supported, the work's getting done, we know what needs to happen immediately in front of us. We're not in a desperate panic to leap to the market and backfill that position. So we're going to continue monitoring, evaluating, I think, main flex. And when we feel ready, we'll report back in the new year with a tighter schedule for hiring. But I'm not looking to make that a priority in December or probably January. And like I said, it's going to depend largely on the conversations we keep having with Samantha and Stacy, and then just how the hiring and onboarding might fit in with our other priorities. So I know personnel is really important, and you'd asked the question last time. I don't have a concrete date, but that's just how we're thinking about how it would fold in terms of priorities, and making sure that when we are ready to make that hire, that we could do so successfully. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more context than what I had answered on the fly last time.
Thank you.
Other than that, I'll just take any questions that the board has.
Thank you, Manager, Mr. Whisker. Any questions for him? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned.